I hadn't heard from my father in nearly 2 years until his retirement invitation arrived in a heavy cream envelope that smelled like money and guilt. It lay on the kitchen counter like a ghost from the past. The embossing shimmered faintly under the pendant light, spelling out Charles Bennett Sr. requests the honor of your presence. I stood staring at it for a full minute before touching it, half expecting it to vanish if I blinked. Ethan walked in from the study, coffee in hand, wearing that well-worn flannel shirt he knew I loved. "You okay?" he asked, nodding toward the envelope. His voice was low, calm, like always. I picked it up. The texture was thick, expensive. It felt like something you'd expect for a senator's gala, not a family dinner. "It's from him," I said quietly. "He's retiring." Ethan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I broke the wax seal with my thumbnail and unfolded the card. The Harvard Club, February 22nd. Formal attire. Champagne reception to follow. It might as well have said, "Bring your resume and list of achievements." That's what it always felt like with my family, another test I'd already failed. For a moment, I considered tossing it straight into the recycling bin, but instead I held it, rereading the elegant script like it might suddenly say something different. "I thought he didn't know where we lived," Ethan said. I gave a half shrug. Guess I underestimated his need for optics. He didn't press. Ethan never did when it came to my father. He just reached for my hand and held it across the countertop. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the couch, the invitation beside me like a silent judge. Outside, snow curled along the edges of the windows, and the city lights blinked through steam rising from the manholes. The radiator hummed. Everything in our Back Bay apartment was quiet, except for the static in my chest. I told myself this might be his way of making peace. I said aloud, though Ethan had gone to bed. But that's not how he works, is it? The last time I saw my father, he barely made eye contact with me. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. Claire had brought her usual sourdough stuffing, and Nathan gave a speech about quarterly earnings. I brought a book I'd just published, my press's first real breakout title. He flipped through it without a word, then handed it back. Later, when I offered to help with dishes, he waved me off like a server. "Let your sister handle it. She's good at details." That was Charles Bennett Sr. in a nutshell. Praise for Claire, pride in Nathan, and for me, polite indifference. I blinked and, without meaning to, slipped into a memory. I was 8, seated at the grand piano in the living room of our old house in Newton. It was my winter recital. I had practiced for weeks. Halfway through Chopin's Nocturne, my left hand slipped. One wrong note. Just one. I looked up, and he was already halfway out the door, adjusting his cufflinks like he had somewhere more important to be. Later, he said he had to take a call. Even at 8, I knew better. Mom would have stayed. Mom always stayed. Her death when I was 14 had been like a bomb in our family. No one talked about grief. Dad just filled the silence with stricter routines and thinner praise. Claire dove into med school. Nathan into hedge funds. I dove into books and stayed there. Back in the present, I texted Aunt Helen. "Did you get one too?" She replied instantly. "I did. Yours came late. Today. I'll be there. For closure, not celebration." I stared at that word, closure. Did people really get that? Ethan came out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Still awake?" "Yeah," I said, folding the invitation shut, trying to decide whether this is an olive branch or just more of the same. He sat beside me, wrapping a throw around both our shoulders. "You don't have to go low." "I know. But if you do go, go for you, not for him." I let that sink in. Ethan always had a way of cutting through the noise. like fresh air after too long inside. I hesitated, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I think I need to know if he can ever really see me, even just once. He didn't argue, just kissed my forehead. The next morning, I made tea and sat at the table with the RSVP card. My fingers trembled slightly as I circled yes. I sealed the envelope, pressed it shut, and held it in my hands. Maybe this time, I whispered, he'll see me. I placed it in my coat pocket, not knowing then that I'd just signed up for the hardest goodbye I'd ever face. The dress was navy, safe, classic, impossible to criticize. But as I studied myself in the hallway mirror, I already knew it wouldn't be enough. I'd chosen it for that exact reason. Not too tight, not too flashy, no trace of rebellion or apology. It fell just below the knee, modest and understated, a silent plea to blend in. I ran a hand over the smooth fabric and inhaled slowly. Maybe this time, they'd just see me as I am. Ethan came up behind me, straightening his tie. He looked crisp in charcoal gray, his hand warm as it rested lightly on the small of my back. Remember, he said, meeting my gaze in the mirror, you don't have to prove anything tonight. I gave a small nod, though I didn't quite believe it. There's something about returning to the people who made you that pulls old wounds to the surface, like cold air on scar tissue. The drive to the Fairmont Copley Plaza felt like sliding into someone else's movie. A doorman in a double-breasted coat opened our car door with white gloves. Inside, chandeliers shimmered over a sea of black suits and cocktail dresses. Laughter rose in little waves, bouncing off the high ceilings. A hotel like this had its own kind of weather, golden, distant, expensive. The scent of fresh peonies, waxed floors, and old wealth lingered in the air. Waiters in tailored uniforms moved silently, balancing trays of seared scallops and tiny artichoke tarts. We gave our names to the hostess at the entrance. She checked her list and pointed, without much warmth, toward the far side of the ballroom. Table 14. Table 14 was a polite exile. Just close enough to see the main table. Just far enough to feel the omission. I guess we didn't make the VIP cut, Ethan murmured with a smile, trying to lighten the mood. I squeezed his hand under the table, grateful for the anchor. From our seats, I could see the family table in full glow. Nathan leaned back confidently, his arms slung over the back of his wife's chair, already mid-joke. Claire, glowing in a sleek silver gown, tossed her hair over one shoulder and flashed the diamond ring that could have bought a Boston brownstone. I didn't miss the way she positioned it as she raised her champagne flute. Aunt Helen passed by and paused at our table. "Lauren, darling," she said, leaning in with a quick air kiss, "you look healthy." I smiled tightly. That particular phrasing, I knew, was Boston code for a little fuller than last year. She turned to Ethan. "Still working from home, I suppose?" she asked with theatrical sympathy, as if that explained everything. "Still loving it," he replied, unfazed. The string quartet transitioned into a slow waltz, and I spotted my father near the stage. He looked like a man built for events like this, navy suit perfectly pressed, silver tie pinched just so. He was laughing at something a board member said, hand resting on the man's shoulder like old friends. I waited for him to look my way. He didn't. When dinner was served, filet mignon or sea bass, of course, Nathan came by our table with a half glass of red wine and a smirk. "So, Lauren," he said, drawing out the vowels, "you're still doing that little book thing, huh?" I glanced at Ethan, who gave me an encouraging nod, but stayed silent. "It's an independent press," I replied. "We just hit the Times list last month." Nathan let out a low whistle. "Well, look at you. Little engine that could." Then he wandered off before I could reply. I pushed the fish around my plate and reminded myself why I'd come. Closure. Clarity. Maybe even courage. Claire floated over next. "You'll be at the wedding, right?" she asked, twirling a diamond earring. "We're doing the plaza." "Manhattan, not Boston. Daddy's helping with the deposit." "Of course he is," I said quietly. She blinked, then offered me a soft, ambiguous smile and returned to her seat. When the plates were cleared and the lights dimmed slightly, I reached into my clutch and pulled out the gift I'd wrapped the night before. A first edition of The Old Man and the Sea, Dad's favorite once. I'd tracked it down from a rare bookstore in Connecticut. It had cost me more than I cared to admit. I stood, walked across the room, and waited until the small circle around him parted. "Hi, Dad," I said, holding out the book. "Congratulations." He took the package without really looking at it, then passed it to someone behind him. "Still into your little publishing thing, I see." There it was. The brush off, wrapped in velvet. I stood there a second too long, then nodded, smiled with everything I had left, and turned away. As dessert was served, lemon tartlets in delicate glassware, the CEO of the bank stepped onto the stage and tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "the moment we've all waited for, Charles Bennett Sr." The room erupted in applause. I didn't clap. "My real children are the ones who made me proud," my father said, and then he looked straight at me. The words landed like a slap. Not loud, not theatrical, just deliberate. It was the tail end of a speech that had gone on far too long. He had thanked the board, the firm, his late mentor from Wharton. He'd recounted stories of Nathan's early entrepreneurial spirit and Claire's residency triumphs at Johns Hopkins. He'd even included a photo slideshow, projected behind him in slow fades, family vacations, awards, weddings. Not a single image of me. I sat frozen, my fork untouched, lemon tart half melted. Ethan's hand found mine under the table, fingers steady, warm. He leaned in slightly. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we walk out together." My throat was tight. I forced a swallow. Up on stage, Charles Bennett Sr. paused for dramatic effect, smiling like a man about to close a multi-million-dollar deal. The applause had just begun to fade when he continued, voice smooth, calculated. "Legacy," he said, "is not about wealth or reputation. It's about values. It's about what your children reflect back to the world. My real children, Nathan and Claire, made me proud." Then he turned his gaze directly toward me. "You can leave." The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. My ears buzzed. For a second, I thought I'd misheard, but no. The room had gone silent. Even the string quartet stopped mid-note. Crystal glassware chimed as someone's hand trembled. Aunt Helen's napkin dropped from her lap, unnoticed. Her eyes flicked between me and the podium, mouth parted, breath held. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the ballroom pin me to the carpet. "Don't cry. Don't cry here." My hands itched with adrenaline, heart pounding against the satin of my dress. Ethan rose beside me, calmly, deliberately. He reached for his water glass, tapped the side with his spoon, once, twice, until the room quieted further, as if that were even possible. He cleared his throat. "I think," he said, voice carrying across the ballroom like velvet steel, "if we're to discuss legacy, there are some details worth adding." My father stared at him, brows tight, expression unreadable. Ethan took a small step forward. "Lauren," he gestured gently to me, "built a publishing house from scratch. She champions voices others overlook. She works late into the night because stories matter to her. People matter." He paused. And when Nathan's first business failed, guess who gave up her entire college fund so he wouldn't go bankrupt? Spoiler. It wasn't Claire. A wave of shifting glances rippled across the tables. Lauren did that. She believed in family, even when family didn't believe in her. Nathan paled across the room. Claire set her wineglass down just a touch too fast. Ethan turned back to my father. You speak of pride like it's a medal to be awarded. But pride without love isn't legacy, it's performance. He paused again. You talk about values, but tonight you showed yours. And they're hollow. No one moved. No one dared. He looked around, voice soft but firm. I know many of you came here to celebrate a career, and I won't take that from you. But if we're measuring success, let's not forget the measure of dignity. He stepped back beside me. We're done here. And then we turned. We walked past waiters frozen in place, past guests who shifted just enough to let us through, but not enough to meet our eyes. My heels clicked against the polished floor like the ticking of some invisible clock I'd just stopped obeying. The ballroom doors felt impossibly far. Behind us, a chair scraped. My father's voice rang out, sharp and unmistakable. If you leave now, you're cut off forever. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, I knew something he never had. You don't earn a last name by obedience. You earn it by becoming someone you can live with when the doors finally close behind you. The silence in our apartment that night was louder than anything my father had said. Not that I remembered his exact words. They had become background noise to the ache in my chest, to the way my reflection in the bathroom mirror looked unfamiliar, as if someone else had worn my face to that dinner and come back cracked. I sat on the couch in my coat for almost an hour. Ethan moved gently around me, placing my heels by the door, setting a cup of chamomile tea on the coffee table without a word. The steam curled up in quiet spirals. I didn't touch it. Eventually, I whispered, I'm sorry you had to do that. He knelt beside me, hands resting on my knees. I didn't do it for me. That was all. And somehow it said everything. The next morning, the Boston sky hung low and gray, echoing the weight inside me. I couldn't bring myself to open the curtains. My inbox was full, and I ignored it. My phone buzzed, Aunt Helen, a missed call. Then a text, call when ready. Love you. Simple. Uncharacteristically warm. But it was Ethan who gently nudged the shift I didn't know I needed. I found some therapists, he said one evening, sliding a folded list toward me like a peace offering. Ones who specialize in family trauma. No pressure. Just options. I stared at the paper. You think I need help? No, he said gently. I think you deserve support. I didn't cry then, but something softened. That night, I read bios online for an hour, clicking through smiling headshots and academic credentials, each one a maybe. 2 days later, I sat across from Dr. Evelyn Moore, soft sweater, kind eyes, office with a window that overlooked bare trees and parked cars. Nothing fancy, just real. I'm not sure where to start, I told her. Start where it hurts, she said. And somehow it didn't feel clinical. It felt like permission. And so I did. The dinner. The speech. The photo slideshow. My mother's absence. My father's cutting looks. The piano recital I'd buried so deep I almost forgot. The one where I fumbled a single note and he left before the final applause. She nodded, taking notes quietly, then asked gently, have you ever considered your father may have been incapable of unconditional love? I flinched. The word incapable clung to me like fog. I had always assumed his love was hidden, locked away, earned through achievement or endurance. But incapable? That made it less about me, and yet more painful somehow. I didn't speak for a full minute, but when I did, my voice came softer. I thought if I was just better, I could reach him. Dr. Moore didn't rush. She simply said, "That belief cost you too much." Later that day, back home in my pajamas and fuzzy socks, I sat by the window watching early March rain streak down the glass. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "You embarrassed Dad." It was his night. Couldn't you have waited? I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another buzz, this time a call from Nathan. I let it ring twice, then answered. Was it true? He asked, no greeting. What Ethan said. About the college fund. I closed my eyes. Yes. Silence. Then, quieter. I didn't know. I know. He didn't apologize. But he didn't hang up either. You still have that old couch in your office? He asked. I blinked. Yeah? He chuckled softly. It's ugly. And, just like that, something thawed, barely. A crack in the frost. Enough. That night, while sorting through a drawer looking for an old recipe card, I found our wedding photo frame, the one with the thin silver border that had cracked on one corner during our last move. I picked it up, and the glass split further in my hands, sharp and fast. Ow, I hissed, more startled than hurt. A single sliver clinked to the floor. Ethan appeared in the doorway, drying his hands on a dish towel. Only the glass broke, he said, taking it gently from me. We're still whole. And maybe for the first time in weeks, I believed him. Portland didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a beginning. There was a softness to the air here, even in late summer. The mornings held a hint of coolness that kissed my skin when I opened the balcony door. Hydrangeas the color of faded denim bloomed under our kitchen window, and birds I couldn't name chirped like old friends returning after a long absence. The day we arrived, Ethan turned to me as we unpacked a box labeled office, Lauren, and said, "This feels right, doesn't it?" I nodded, surprised at how much it did. I had always wondered where I came from. Now I was starting to wonder who I wanted to become. Our apartment was smaller, cozier than Boston. The floors creaked just enough to remind you that people had lived here before. The windows let in honey-colored light by afternoon. I'd chosen this place for the built-in shelves alone, some already filled with poetry and memoirs sent by authors hoping to be published by Lighthouse Press. Speaking of which, the business had come with me. Not just in boxes and invoices, but in purpose. Portland was full of dreamers and doers, of writers who didn't fit neat molds. It made sense to launch a new imprint, Voices Unheard, a place for stories that had been dismissed or spoken over. I spent mornings reading submissions with coffee from the corner cafe, where books lined the windows and the baristas always remembered Ethan's name. I spent afternoons planning a small literary event with local indie publishers. No suits, no stage lights, just folding chairs and stories. One afternoon, a package arrived, hand-addressed from a Judith Marks in Asheville. My mother's sister. We'd only met a few times before her move west years ago, but she'd heard from Aunt Helen about what happened. Inside the envelope were old photos, my mother brushing my baby hair to the side, my hand in hers during a backyard picnic. And journals. Pages and pages of my mother's thoughts, written in looping cursive, filled with book quotes and baby milestones and reflections on parenting without losing yourself. I wept. I always felt like the wrong puzzle piece, I told Ethan that night, but maybe I was just in the wrong box. He reached across the kitchen table and squeezed my hand. Or maybe you're the piece that starts a new puzzle. A week later, Aunt Helen arrived. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried a tote bag with a bookstore logo I didn't recognize. She took one look at our apartment and said, "Cozy. Smells like hope." We sat on the balcony, sipping iced tea, watching the breeze ruffle the curtain. She pulled out a faded envelope and handed it to me. "These are yours." Inside were more photos, my father, years ago, holding baby me in his lap, eyes soft, a smile not quite familiar. There was one of us on a beach, me in a floppy sun hat, him building a sandcastle. My throat tightened. "He wasn't always like this," Helen said gently. "Your mother softened him, but after she passed, he hardened." "I used to think I failed him," I whispered. "He failed you, Lauren." That night, I journaled for the first time in years. Not for work, not to make sense of someone else's story, but to put my own heart on the page. Days passed. Lighthouse Press bloomed in ways I hadn't imagined. We signed a memoir from a formerly incarcerated poet, a collection of essays from queer elders, a debut novel by a refugee. I met with readers in local libraries, hosted editing circles and cafes. Jason, of all people, reached out on a random Wednesday. "Hi," his message said. Wasn't sure if I should reach out. I started therapy. "You were right, it helps." I stared at the screen, blinking, then typed back, "Glad you're doing the work. Keep going." Simple. Honest. Then came the literary event, a room above a downtown bakery, folding chairs, warm lighting. I wore a vintage blazer that once belonged to my mom. When I stepped up to the mic to welcome the audience, I didn't overthink my words. I didn't rehearse them the way I used to mentally rewrite every conversation with my father. I spoke from the place inside me that had always been quiet. This press began with one voice, mine. A voice that often felt too soft to matter. But we're here because voices like that do matter. Especially when they come together. People clapped. A few stood. Afterward, as I collected flyers and thanked the bakers, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Dad asked about you. Do what you want with that." I stared at the words, unmoving. For the first time, they didn't spark longing or fear. They sparked choice. When I first held my daughter, I finally understood what unconditional meant. Her skin was soft as rising dough, her cry small but certain. Lily Margaret Bennett, born on a rainy Tuesday in October. The nurse handed her to me swaddled in a yellow blanket, and I remember whispering, "You don't have to do anything to deserve this love." That night, while Ethan dozed in the chair with his hoodie pulled over his eyes, I cradled her against my chest and cried, not from fear or sadness, but from the quiet cracking open of something I hadn't known was still closed. "She will never have to wonder if she's enough," I whispered into her ear. In the weeks that followed, our little Portland home transformed. Diapers, bottles, lullabies, and hand-knit blankets spilled into every corner. The bookshelf in our living room held poetry next to pacifiers, and the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and burp cloths. We were exhausted, grateful, and full of a love that felt cellular. Thanksgiving arrived on a golden afternoon. We hosted a small dinner on the deck, mismatched chairs pulled from every room, food piled high on thrifted platters. Aunt Helen brought sweet potato casserole topped with toasted marshmallows. Jason and his girlfriend, Marla, brought a bottle of wine and a tin of old family photos he'd uncovered, pictures of us as kids, our mother laughing in a sun hat, one of me asleep on her shoulder. "I figured you should have these," he said, sliding them across the table. Claire hadn't come. She sent a gift, a minimalist wooden mobile for Lily's crib, and a card signed simply, Claire. Still distant, but not cruel. I took it as a step. Or a silence with space for something else later. During dinner, After the pecan pie had been devoured and Lily had fallen asleep on Aunt Helen's shoulder, Ethan stood to toast. His glass caught the light just right, like a movie scene. "To chosen family," he said. "To the ones we build, not the ones we're born into." Everyone raised a glass. And I realized something that startled me. I hadn't thought about my father in weeks. Until Claire texted. "He had a mild stroke. Thought you should know." I didn't reply right away. For 2 days, I let the message sit there like unopened mail. Then, while dropping off milk at the NICU for a donation drive, I saw him. In the hallway. Hospital gown under a navy cardigan. Hair thinner. Posture softer. He saw me too. We stopped. Neither of us moved closer. He looked down at the floor. Then up again. "You look well," he said quietly. "Thank you," I replied. A long pause. "You have a daughter?" "Yes. She must be something." "She is." He nodded. "Good." Then someone called his name from the far end of the hallway, and he turned. Just like that, he was gone again. No apology. No breakdown. Just a brief civil crossing of paths. I walked outside into the pale morning light, unsure what I felt. Not angry. Not relieved. Just done. Not with bitterness, but with the part of me that kept hoping for a father who'd never arrive. That night, I rocked Lily by the fire, her fingers curled tightly around mine. She smelled like oatmeal and lavender. The house was quiet. Peaceful. "You never have to earn my love," I whispered. The words fell into the dark like a promise. And then I felt something shift. I wasn't just speaking to her. I was speaking to myself. Lily stirred in her sleep, adjusted her grip on my finger. I sat back, let the firelight flicker across our faces, and exhaled. Not a breath I'd been holding. A new one. A first. When my daughter held my hand with her tiny fingers, I didn't just feel like a mother. I felt healed. What I had tried to take from my father, I learned to give to others without conditions. In life, true love doesn't require achievement or proof. It just requires presence, listening, and forgiveness. We may not be able to choose the family we're born into, but we can choose how we love and are loved. And sometimes, that's the greatest gift of all. If this story touches your heart, I encourage you to share your feelings or simply hold on to a gentle thought for today.